to other Rebecca.
My name is Deborah.
Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is finally going to be my review for the rest of the first half of the season of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 4, Episodes 3 through 8, and look, I know you guys are probably like, what the hell, Kevin? You promised us a weekly review. What ended up happening? Two things. One, way too much happened in my life for me to do a weekly review. I just really had no time whatsoever. Two, I just kind of fell behind, and it's not because I don't love the show. You guys know how much I adore the show. It just simply is because I fell behind, and you know, the first half of the season had ended, and I told myself, okay, I'm going to wait before the second half starts up, and that's exactly what I did. And after seeing it, I will say that these chock of episodes all range from good to truly amazing. I mean, there's a lot to dissect here. All of these episodes are really different in their own way, and I'm just going to get into it right now. Now, because there are so many episodes to talk about, I'm not going to structure this like a normal TV review. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go through each episode as if it was a catch-up review. You know, I'm going to talk briefly about each episode, what I liked, what I didn't like, and then give my rating at the end, and let's just get started. So the first episode to talk about is Season 4, Episode 3, I'm on my own path, and that is very accurately titled because this entire episode basically focuses around Rebecca being a lawyer and sort of the discovery that this isn't really what she wants to do. And I really love the way this episode unfolds because, look, I think we've always known that this isn't really what Rebecca wants. I mean, she never has really taken it all that seriously, especially when compared to Paula, who takes it extremely seriously and is so dedicated to it. Rebecca just does not compare in that sense. You know, the only time she really took it seriously is when it was helping her get closer to Josh. That was really the only time she did that. And also the reason she took the job is because her mother was so adamant about her doing so. And in this episode, she starts to realize that maybe she doesn't want to do that. She happens upon this pretzel shop that Jim is now working at. And, you know, she realizes that, yes, it is an easy job, but it's something that is making people happy. And it's something that is bringing people joy. Something as simple as just someone purchasing a pretzel, you know, it's something that she enjoys doing, and I really liked where this episode ended up going because she realizes that she doesn't really want to do this anymore, and there's that great scene where she's talking to Paula, and she's telling her how, you know, it isn't really her aspiration anymore, and that she doesn't necessarily know what she wants to do, but that this is sort of a gateway into something else, and I really love seeing that. I think that was a really great scene, and that alone made me really love this episode. But then on top of that, we have all this stuff going on with Heather and Hector, which I really love their plotline here. Essentially, what this is about is Hector ends up basically, what ends up happening is, you know, he needs help with health insurance. I believe he had some sort of like appointment or he was injured or something, and he needed help with health insurance, but unfortunately, he was not able to get it as quickly unless they were married. So these two literally end up marrying at the end of this episode. They do have a proper ceremony, and it was honestly really sweet. I like the way that whole thing unfolded. I like that Rebecca just randomly showed up there, even though she wasn't really a part of it. I like that she ended up giving the speech and things like that. It was a really nice moment for the two of them. And in a show where you have a lot of characters that are just absolutely crazy and doing the most ridiculous things, it's nice to see a moment of just normalcy. I like that these two just had a really quiet wedding. They didn't make a big deal out of it, and it says a lot about their progression. I mean, we all remember last season when Heather at this point was graduating college and didn't know what she wanted to do, and the fact that she's come this far, it's just really great to see, and I really did love this moment. I think it was definitely a really fantastic moment for them as characters, and it really does, again, begin to show sort of like the end game for these characters, where they're starting to go. And the other thing to really talk about with this episode, because like I said, I definitely really did enjoy that, is the stuff between Rebecca and Josh, because these two are on really good terms now because of the fact that Josh isn't really someone that Rebecca thinks of in a loving sense. now they just have this really good understanding of each other, and that's something that we see not just in this episode, but throughout the rest of the episodes of this season, and I really just like seeing that. I like seeing the sort of playful banter that they had. I thought it was really sweet, and it was something different that we hadn't really seen before, Rebecca having a normal, healthy relationship, and that's something that she tries to do all these episodes, and it seems like with Josh, it actually is working, and I really did enjoy that here. Overall, I just thought this was a very enjoyable episode. There's a lot to really like about. Also, the new character, AJ, I really like him a lot. I think he really does blend in quite well. He's a nice sort of, another person for Rebecca to talk to, and I enjoy his inclusion in the show. I love Jim in the show. I love what we end up getting with him here. And of course, the ending with Nathaniel. I mean, you can tell that Nathaniel, he's not letting go his feelings for Rebecca, and we'll especially get to that in the next episode, but overall, this was a really strong episode, and I'm definitely going to give this one overall a B+. Alright, so the next episode to talk about is episode 4, I'm Making Up for Lost Time, and this episode, while a lot of these episodes I really did love, this is the only episode that I'm talking about that I wasn't really in love with. There were a lot of things this episode that I didn't necessarily hate, like I didn't hate this episode or anything, but just compared to other episodes, it was not up to par, because what this episode is essentially about is Rebecca, she's trying to forge a connection with her younger brother. You know, she hasn't really met him before, and she's trying to sort of strike up a connection with him. And we think everything's going to go great. At first it seems like they're getting along great. He seems to have the same interests as her. But the episode makes a very fatal mistake, and this is really where my biggest complaint of the episode comes, is that it's revealed very early on that the whole reason that her brother is getting along so well with her and why they have so many of the same sort of goals and interests and things like that is because of the fact that he has read her entire diary. And you know throughout the entire episode that he has these ulterior motives, and this wouldn't be a problem if the episode plays it in a very genuine manner. The episode acts as if we don't know what her brother is doing, but we always know that he is up to no good. So any moments in the episode where something sweet happened between the two of them, there was just always this sense of it not being real and it being artificial, and it just really did not work for me. So as much as I wanted to enjoy the moment where Rebecca realizes that someone else loves the movie Slumbered, we know that it's too good to be true, and I think it really was a mistake to reveal that. I think they should have waited till after he sang that song and then reveal what was actually up, that there was something that he had read that from her diary, because it would have just been a much more effective moment, and imagine just how much better it would have been. I mean, if we hadn't known then we would have thought, holy shit, Rebecca actually is having this really good connection with someone. She's actually not messing it up for once, but unfortunately, we know pretty much from the early goings that, her brother Tucker is up to no good. In reality, what we find out is that Tucker, we realize that he's trying to get this audition because she realizes that he's a really great singer, and he ends up auditioning, but it ends up going horribly wrong because his sort of, aspirations, things like that, really do freak out the director. They end up hounding her and things like that, and this is when things really get crazy. Nathaniel gets in on the action, really only to win over Rebecca, though, because what he ends up doing is he ends up conspiring with her brother. They start up this whole thing, and Rebecca just snaps at Nathaniel, and I loved this moment where she just tells him straight up, like, they are not meant to be together. They aren't going to work out, and he needs to move on from it. And I like that she told him that. This was a very mature thing for Rebecca. Rebecca of 2 seasons ago would not do this, but the fact that Rebecca has changed this much, the fact where she can actually say, I don't like you like this, it's not going to work out between us, and you need to move on, was just really great to see, and I thought it was a really nice moment of progression for her. And, after this scene, that's when I really started to like this episode more, because for a while I wasn't really liking it. But after this, then we get the real reason why Tucker really read her diary. It's not because of something sinister. It's because of the fact that he wanted to be close to her. He wanted to have a connection with her, and he didn't really know how to do so. And we realize that these two are pretty similar in that way, where they don't really know how to make those connections. And we see Tucker, someone who thinks very low of himself. He does not really have very good self-esteem at all. And the mother that, Rebecca thought she was texting was actually Tucker's number the entire time, and that's when she starts to realize that something is up, because for a while Nathaniel was trying to tell her what was going on, but Rebecca just saw it as he was just trying to turn her against her brother, and, in reality, he was trying to do that, like, he was doing that for her affections, but, he was right where her brother was playing her, and he wasn't being honest with her, and I like that moment they have where she ends up calling his mom, and she actually wants him to come back, and it's just a really nice moment. You see that even though, yes, what Tucker did was wrong, he still does want to be a singer, he wants to have a good connection with his sister, and I definitely did enjoy that overall. I liked where they ended up going with that, and I think overall that definitely was a very good moment. Just overall as an episode, though, I'm not gonna lie, minus the whole moment with Nathaniel, this was kind of a filler episode. There wasn't really a ton going on that we necessarily needed, but similar to a lot of the episodes, it actually does benefit the show because it keeps things from happening too fast. There's always a sense that something is going to happen, and this is just another good building block that I really did love seeing. I also enjoyed the subplot with Paula in this episode where she's trying to bond with her kids, and at first it's not going too well because she ends up taking them to this place that they don't really want to be. She takes them to this escape room, but it actually turns out pretty well. They end up having a good time, they end up bonding, and I did really like the way that was done. Just like I said, overall, a lot of this episode I was not really the biggest fan of. It wasn't until Tucker actually came clean and she had that great moment with Nathaniel that I'm like, okay, now I get why we really do have this episode. Now I get what they're trying to do here. So overall, I am going to give this episode a B-. Definitely the weakest of the bunch, but one that I definitely did start to come more around on towards the end. So the next episode I'm going to talk about is episode 5, I'm So Happy For You, and this episode I loved. This is probably one of the strongest of the ones I'm talking about because really after episode 5, that's when this season truly does get great. Episode 5 is when things finally start to feel like a final season. It's not like the rest of the season hasn't because they've been introducing things that they really haven't talked about since season 1, but this is really when things start to get in motion because Rebecca unfortunately has to process the fact that both of her friends are leaving her. Heather and Valencia are both moving out, and it makes sense. Heather and Hector are now married, so they want to try to find a new apartment, and Valencia and Beth are trying to find their own sort of apartment as well. They're moving out, they're moving elsewhere, and Rebecca has to process the fact that her friends, while she'll be able to see them, are not going to be right around the corner. And you see that she kind of has this moment where she ends up regressing, where instead of her just kind of accepting it, she instead decides to turn to Maya and AJ, two people who I wouldn't say she didn't have a connection with, but she doesn't have the connection that she did with Valencia and Heather. But she kind of acts like they do. She uses them as a way to sort of replace Valencia and Heather and keep them from leaving. And Maya and AJ, they're on board because they enjoy spending time with Rebecca, but what ends up happening is But she ends up inviting both Maya and AJ to this party, and it doesn't really end up going well at all. Rebecca's acting way too cool, and she's trying to, again, get over the fact of what's happening to them, but eventually she does face reality, and I like the moment where she realizes that, they're still going to be there, but she needs to move on, and it's a good moment for her. I like seeing that. I like the stuff with Dr. Akopian. It definitely was well done, and obviously we're not saying goodbye to Heather and Valencia, because they still do play a big part in the next 2 or 3 episodes, which I'll talk about. But in terms of the girl group being together, the core 4, we're not going to see that as much, and I think that was definitely a very good move here. So I really enjoyed that stuff, but the thing I did really love the most in this episode actually was Paula's subplot. I thought Paula's subplot was very strong, where she's saying goodbye to Brendan, and yes, Brendan, the person that was very rebellious and was constantly finding himself in drugs and things like that, he's actually finally turned his life around. He's joining the Peace Corps, and Paula feels like her life is slipping away. She doesn't want to get rid of him, so she runs into one of Brendan's old flames and basically tries to reunite them together. They kind of concoct this scheme where they make Paula think that, like, she's that his ex is pregnant or whatever, and that was a nice moment because, again, it's showing that he is serious about this. He wants to join the Peace Corps. He's not going to let anything derail that. And I like the moment at the end where Paula is basically telling him that, basically that there's that song where she talks about how she never believed in him. And as usual, it's one of those songs where, sure, it is really funny, but it also is a really sweet moment where she's letting her son be independent. She's sending him off. You can tell it's a hard moment for her, but I really loved where this ended up going. I think it's a really great conclusion to this story of Paula and her sons. I like that we got that in these 2 episodes, and I think it was definitely very well done here. And then when you culminate that with, like I said, Heather and Valencia saying goodbye as well, them going on in their separate ways, they've really come a long way too. I mean, back in season 2, Valencia was trying to figure out where her career really was, and then she realized that she was really good at party planning. Then she went Beth. Things have gone great for her since then. And same, like I said, with Heather. So it really does apply to everything going on, and I really did enjoy that. And I thought that was definitely a very strong plotline here where they end up going with that. The only thing I didn't care for in this episode was the Daryl and White Josh subplot. I just thought this was a little bit forced. I understood that they were trying to make fun of the people that are shipping them together. And the song, The Group Mine Has Decided You're in Love, I love that song. I think it's one of the best songs of the season. The set pieces are so elaborate. I love the Western setting. I love the feel of it all. It's great. I really do love that. But the subplot involving them, it was just kind of blah. Like, I didn't really care as much about it. I understood what they were trying to do, but the whole sort of thing is, like, they're spending too much time together, so they let each other go their separate ways, and I don't know, I mean, it was a thing. It seemed like it was just sort of here so Daryl and White Josh had something to do, and there aren't many episodes like that, but this is the one instance where usually I talk about how Daryl is the most underused character in the show, and that's still true. They're definitely improving that this season, giving him a lot more to do, especially in the next episode for sure. But here it just felt a little forced, and I wasn't really the biggest fan of it. Other than that, though, I really love this episode. There's a lot of great moments. I mean, the whole moment where they're trying to decide if fizzy is actually a word and if people actually use that stuff was great. All the stuff with Dr. Akopian I really enjoyed. This is just everything that I really do love in a Crazy Ex-Girlfriend episode. So I'm definitely giving this one a B+, the highest of the B pluses so far. So now I'm going to talk about episode 6, I See You, and holy shit, I loved this episode. And you know, throughout the season, I was waiting for that truly amazing episode, and this is it. There's so much to love about this episode. It's a very simple premise. The whole episode are just, you know, someone's in a car, they end up driving someone, and it ends up turning their life, it ends up, you know, turning around their perspective on that person. And what I really love about this episode is you get to see a lot of characters interact that have not interacted before. Now, first, Rebecca and Daryl, yes, these two have interacted, but not really since season 1. We haven't really seen them interact, just the two of them, really since season 1. And that's something that is addressed in this episode, how Rebecca, a lot of the time, she does not really treat Daryl like he's her friend. He kind of just seems like someone who's there because no one else is. And you do get that sense here where she's someone who, you know, she wants to just have fun, you know, so there's so much pressure being mounted on her. She wants to just have fun. She doesn't want to think about really any of the stresses of her life. And she ends up inviting Daryl because this is someone who she thinks she's going to be able to have a lot of fun with. And while at first it ends up going well, Daryl does end up bringing up her past. But what I loved about this episode, they don't make a big deal out of it. Like, they both of them are aware of what they're doing. And they get to move, they have some really good progression as friends here, where Daryl realizes that he needs to kind of be a little less pushy about things, and he needs to focus more on just having fun, but he also needs to be able to stand up for himself, and he does do that here, because there are times where Rebecca is overstepping a bit, and I really like those moments between them. I thought that was definitely really strong. And then we get to the part where the episode could have gone off the rails, because the two of them, they end up having a really nice time at this barbecue or whatever, which I ended up enjoying, but Rebecca ends up getting pretty drunk to the point where she almost makes out with Daryl. And Look, this could have been a jump the shark moment, but the show actually passes it off pretty nicely because both of them really don't feel anything. It's just Rebecca was kind of having a moment, and it makes her have this realization instead that she can be with someone who is really just a nice guy and someone who isn't someone who is very clingy or aloof and things like that. And I like that realization. I like that she's realizing that she is capable of happiness. And I think it's just, again, the whole point of the show is for Rebecca to learn that pursuit of happiness and finally find it. And I think we're definitely starting to move closer to that here, and I really did like seeing that. And her and Daryl's friendship is stronger than ever, and I really like the way that ended. And Daryl even ends up shaving his mustache in this episode, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's just another moment of progression where it's something that he doesn't have to worry about anymore. It's something that is just not a problem of his, and I really like seeing that. Again, it's something that is just, it's a really sweet moment, and I love the moment where she's talking about how there will be other Daryls in the world, and like I said, these two have been are closer than they've ever been, and I really like that. Now, as far as stuff with Paula and Josh went, that stuff I did like. However, it is, I think, the least developed out of everything in this episode, and look, it's not like we didn't get really good stuff with them, because we did. I mean, Paula starts off, she wants nothing to do with Josh, but the second she meets him, we realize that he's taking his therapy a lot more seriously than you would expect him to be. His vocabulary is much better. He is much more in tune with his problems and what he really needs to be focusing on. And while Paula doesn't really give much of a shit, we eventually realize, that she does see the potential in Josh, and he also really does help her, because her whole thing is that she needs to get a desk in order to study for her bar exam, because, again, she's really trying to go to law school. This is something she's been trying to do since season 2, and she's finally starting to get there. She's making the final steps into going into law school, and we see her, she needs someone to lift a desk for her. Turns out to be Josh, and he's actually really good at it. This is something that he enjoys doing for her, and these two really do get to understand each other more. And I really love the moment at the end where she encourages him to move out of Hector's mom's house. Not just because it's really weird, but because it's something that is going to help him move forward and find that sense of direction, find that sense of purpose. And I definitely did like seeing that. What I wasn't as big as a fan of is everything going on with that woman. I understand the joke that, like, Paula was distracted by all the antiques and things like that, but I don't know. It just felt like there could have been a lot more they could do within that subplot, and while I did enjoy what we got with Paula and Josh, and I like the interactions between them, because again, Paula thinks completely differently of Josh now. She doesn't see him as a loser. She sees him as someone who has far more potential than she ever could have imagined. Just overall, I didn't feel as satisfied as I did with the others, and maybe that's because of the stuff in the other subplots episode, because for me, easily, the highlight of this entire episode is the pairing of Heather and Nathaniel. And again, these are two people who I never would have imagined would have been paired together in an episode, but I am so happy that they did, because we get easily the strongest arc from them. It starts off and Heather's just going on her way to, I believe she's just going off to work or something like that, and she's going to meet Nathaniel. She finds Nathaniel, and she sees that his car is broken down, and he's holding this very mysterious envelope in his hands, and we don't really know what it's about. And while at first he's just being very cold and aloof, as he usually is, eventually he ends up opening up to her, because we open up the envelope, her car ends up breaking down, they end up getting into a bit of a, an argument, and the envelope ends up opening and outpours all of these ashes. And then we get this moment with Nathaniel that I just love. This is probably his biggest moment yet, where we basically realize why Nathaniel loves Rebecca as much as he does, because it turns out these ashes are from his childhood pair. This is someone who was in his life basically throughout most of his childhood. She was there until, I believe he said, he was like 17. Then she just kind of left, and he never saw her again. But she's recently died, and her family has asked for him to scatter all of her ashes. And he always loved her. He always had that sense of warmth, and he realized that she was someone that truly cared about him. And he never really felt the way for anyone until Rebecca came along. And now we realize what's really going on. Now this gives Nathaniel a much greater purpose. We realize that he's not just someone who is constantly pressured by his dad to constantly be proper and to constantly be on top of things. We realize that he's someone who just really needs that love in his life, and he didn't really have that until Rebecca came along. And I really love that moment where Heather tells him that he shouldn't be afraid to show this side of himself. He shouldn't be afraid to get a little sad. He shouldn't be afraid to be upset about this. And I like that he ends up opening up here. It's a really nice moment for the two of them. The moment where they buried his au pair's like ashes into that vent, I thought was a really effective moment. Like, sure, they didn't get to the beach, but he was still able to, bury her ashes, and it was a really nice moment the way that was done. Scatter her ashes there. It was a really nice moment the way they did that. And then the ending of the episode where he ends up going to Bert, and sure, he does end up kissing Bert on the forehead, but again, it's this moment of progression for Nathaniel where he's going to try to be a little bit nicer. He's going to try to exude more kindness into the world and just start to appreciate things more. And you see that Heather really has left this impact on him that you really would not have expected, and I really did love seeing that. The moment where she ends up getting a new car as well because he complained about her car. I mean, just everything about this I adored. This is really what made the episode for me. I love the stuff with Rebecca and Daryl, but this is what made the episode for me. Just seeing someone like Nathaniel, who started off the show just such a dick and so unlikable, and seeing what he has really gone through and how he really is going to progress and evolve from this. And he does very much end up doing that in these next two episodes and probably throughout the rest of the show. It just really hit me in all the right ways, and I really love the way this was done. I just thought that was very strong. Also, the musical numbers in this episode were both great. I love Trapped in a Car with Somebody You Don't Want to Be Trapped in a Car With. The fact that they go through the entire career of the Beach Boys in those 4 minutes is extremely impressive. I think it's one of the best, most impressive set pieces we've ever seen on the show, for sure. I mean, everything about that was fantastic. I love Farewell Fair Mustache as well. That was hilarious. But just everything about this episode, it reminds me why I love the show. Sure, I love it, the fun, and I love the hilarity and things like that, but at the end of the day, it's these character moments that really do make the show for me. It reminded me why I love these characters as much as I did. I like that we had these little, vignettes with them, where each of them, they were paired up with someone that they really weren't paired up with before, and it says a lot about really everyone's chemistry. Everyone is just such a great actor. Everyone worked very well together, and I'm very happy we were able to get episodes like this. I've said it before in seasons 2 and 3, this is why I'm glad we have 18 episodes, because if we had 13, we would not be able to get episodes like this where we're just able to pause and see what these characters are going through and kind of watch them just struggle with their inner demons and finally express them to people that we didn't really see before. And I think overall it was just a really great moment. I adored this episode, and I'm definitely going to give I See You overall an A-. And that does carry over into episode 7, which admittedly I don't really have a ton to say about, but I still really did love this episode. There's a lot to really love here. Essentially, this episode, it's about Rebecca. She's going to meet up with her mother, and considering how the last time this played out, obviously, we're very worried. I mean, we don't really know how this is going to entail. Rebecca's also very worried about, what she has to tell her mother, but she gets there, and Naomi already pretty much knows everything. She knows about the suicide attempt. She knows about her being arrested, her then pleading guilty. She knows about all of that stuff, and, basically, she is there because her mother is going to meet up with this. I believe it was a this friend that she had that she was at a camping thing with, and she's become this very successful lawyer, and she's meeting up with her. But they end up running into Audra Levine in this episode, which I actually really did like seeing Audra one last time, and again, it brought us back to season 1. And what the entire episode essentially is about is it's basically leading up to Rebecca just finally telling her mother to fuck off. And I love seeing that. I love seeing Rebecca just finally grow that independence. Someone like Rebecca's mother who is just so specific with what she wants, and she can't really seem to accept her for, she has to be this specific way, and if she's not like that, then she's not going to support her. And I like that Rebecca just puts her foot down at the end and says, you know what, fine, if you're not going to support me, this is the person I am, and you don't have to like it, but that's just who I am. And I really like the way that did end there. I liked that even the friend that Naomi was trying to get doesn't really like her. The only reason she's there is because Valencia was able to get her there, and I like the way that was done. I thought definitely they had some really great moments there, and again, I was glad to see that Rebecca just finally stood up to her mother after all this time, and I thought that was definitely really great. But this also is a really big episode for Josh, because as we know, Josh is kind of become this loser, but these last few episodes, he's really been doing a lot to turn himself around and get people to take him more seriously. He moves out of Hector's apartment. He's now staying temporarily at Rebecca's, and basically, he's forced to learn how to clean up. Basically, he's never had to clean up for himself, which, again, it sounds pathetic, and it is, because he's always had someone to do it for him, whether it was his mother, whether it was Valencia, whether it was Rebecca, whether, he's always had someone to do it for him. And rather, have someone to do it, he now has to do it all on his own. And the best scene of this entire thing is actually when Daryl comes over, because rather than Daryl just continue to be a pushover and just clean up the entire house, he actually makes Josh do it himself. And again, this shows a lot of growth for Daryl as well, that he isn't just going to let people push him around anymore. He's going to make them do things, and I really like the way that was done. He actually does end up cleaning up the entire house, and the episode actually ends with him actually permanently moving in with Rebecca, which, again, seems a bit, it doesn't really seem like the greatest idea, but considering the dynamic that they have and that they're, basically closer than ever, and they really do have this nice, healthy sort of relationship that's developing, I think this is definitely a good move, and I'm excited to see where that really does go. And considering that the show started off being, Rebecca and Josh, that's supposed to be like the main pairing, I think it makes sense to have those two, not together, but as friends. I think it makes sense to have that be still a vocal point of the show, and I really did like seeing that. The only other thing to really talk about is what's going on with Nathaniel. He is trying to do whatever he can to really turn over a good leaf, and everyone's freaked out because he's acting all nice to them. He even ends up working on this case with Paula, one of the prisoners that Rebecca was going to, because remember, we never really touched upon that after episode 1, but we actually do get to see that here. She goes back to the jailhouse, and she's trying to give them legal advice, but she's not there to do it. So Nathaniel actually ends up taking on this case and helping out one of the prisoners, and I thought that was a really great moment for him. I really liked the way that was done. So yeah, there was definitely a lot to like about this episode. I like that Paula and Nathaniel kind of have this bond now. Just there's a lot to really like here. The songs in this episode, I will admit, they really weren't the best. None of them really were that amazing. I like the one that Naomi sang, but other than that, the songs did not really do it for me here. This wasn't really an episode that was about the music, which, I mean, no episode really is, but this was not one where a lot of the songs really did stick out to me. A lot of them were actually pretty forgettable. But between all the character development we got, there's a lot of great character growth. Also, there was one line that Josh said when he calls up Rebecca, and he talks about how Daryl told him to follow common sense. That was hilarious. I mean, that's so Josh right there, and I loved everything about that. So because of the character growth and things like that, this episode as well is going to get an A-. And now we get to the last episode I'm going to be talking about here, the mid-season finale, episode 8, I'm Making Up for Lost Time, and Holy shit, where do I begin with this episode? I mean, there is actually a lot to say here. And as I said, because of the fact that they really did take their time with these first 7 episodes, having so much happen here is not a problem. It feels like we've been waiting for something to happen. We've been waiting for something to spark, and we actually finally do get to see that here. We see what's actually happening because in the last episode, of course, Rebecca, her feelings for Nathaniel and Josh are starting to come back. She's starting to feel those sparks fly again, and she doesn't want that to happen because she knows exactly what's going to happen if she does feel the way, and she's not really ready to do that yet. In fact, in the last episode, she was trying to move on from them and get more into dating apps and things like that. So this episode, she's very conflicted between the two. And she ends up going to Josh's high school reunion, where she very quickly ends up running into Greg. But no, it is not the Greg that you and I have known. It is not Santino Fontana. It's played by Skylar Astin. I was a little bit worried when I heard he was casted at first, but once Aline, Brosh, McKenna, and Rachel Bloom explained what they were trying to do, I thought it made a lot of sense, and it does make a lot of sense here, because Rebecca has very much changed since the events of Season 2, so she's going to look at Greg a little bit differently. He's going to feel like a new person to her, because she sees him in a different way. She doesn't see him as this person she's obsessed with and this perfect guy. She knows the faults that he has, and she knows that he's been away for a while, so all of the in-jokes, let me just say, was great. I mean, the meta humor in this episode was spot on. There's so much great stuff, which I'll get to a little bit later, but the stuff between Greg and Rebecca I thought was so well handled. Skylar Astin honestly killed it in this role, and sure, he's doing some things that are a little bit different. Like, he's downplaying a little bit more of the, angrier side of Greg, but there are moments in the episode where I legitimately forgot that it wasn't Santino Fontana, because he really did have this character down to a T. The mannerisms were there, the ways he would speak. I mean, the chemistry between these two is correct, and I think they definitely did a very good job of that, because obviously things are very awkward, but then we remember why these two were together, why they enjoyed each other's company. Greg, he kind of just wants to start over, and Rebecca at first is on board with that, but there are a lot of things that are precluding her from doing so. But the biggest one of all, of course, being that she slept with Greg's dad. This is something that she knows she has to tell him. She knows it's going to get brought up, but she doesn't know when to do it, and I really loved the way this did play out, where for a while it just seemed like she was going to go along with the whole charade of them just getting to know each other, starting over and getting to know each other more and enjoying each other's company. And there's a lot of great moments there where we realize that Greg, he actually did come back to West Covina a couple times, but he just didn't want to tell her because he was trying to get away from her. And I didn't really see this as him being rude or him trying to avoid her. I think he just knew at that time that it was best for, the best thing was for the best of them to be, the best thing for both of them was for them to be separated from each other and for them to continue with their lives, just not together. And I think we kind of saw that in Season 2, and it definitely did feel like the same Greg in that sense. Like, when we get into those things, yeah, it did feel like the same Greg. Again, even though he definitely has turned himself around. He's a lot more rational. He's not an alcoholic. He's not angry all the time, and you definitely do see that here. Things are still, there's a lot of contentious there. Like, there's still a lot of contention going on within that relationship, but it's not as bad as it once was until the end of the episode, where Rebecca finally, because of the fact that they're getting so close, she actually does end up telling Greg, and I like the way this played out. They could have easily done something where they end up screaming at each other, but that's not what happens. Greg reacts, and sure, he's outraged, and he just feels that this was not a good idea. They're not right for each other anymore. They can't be together. So I don't know if the show is going to keep trying to pit these two together. I think they're bringing Greg back, but I don't think the sole purpose of bringing Greg back is to try to get him and Rebecca together. I think they're bringing Greg back just to close out his chapter. From what I understand, Aline Brosh McKenna said there is actually a lot more she wanted to do with that character, so I'm interested in seeing what they end up doing with him. I think Skylar Astin is killing it in this role, and I'm very excited to see what they do throughout the rest of the show, which I assume he's going to be on for the rest of the show, which I'm definitely very excited to see. But the other great thing going on this episode is everything with Valencia and Heather. I love this. I love the subplot that was going on because one, it gave them something to do, and that's something else that I really love is that really everyone got something to do except for Daryl. He wasn't in this episode, but it made sense because it was centered around a high school reunion. You couldn't really fit him in there. But what they do here is great. You know, the second they arrive at the reunion, Valencia's just acting very awkward and secretive, like she's trying to avoid something. And Heather, she not only is interested, but she is just living for this drama because her life has become very unexciting since her and Hector have gotten married. And I like that Heather worked as like the audience here. Like she basically was the audience wanting to know all of the dirty laundry that was going on with Valencia, and we find out that she hooked up with someone when she wasn't dating Josh, and at first Heather thinks that this was a girl, that this was her first sort of relationship with a girl, but we find out it's actually not that. It actually turns out to be Father Bra. Yeah, Father Bra, of course. You know, one of Josh's close friends, the priest, they actually did hook up when in senior year, and Valencia apparently wrote him this letter. She was planning on, you know, she really loved him. She was hoping that they could meet up after, you know, in senior year, but he actually never read the letter, and he finally reads it in this moment. And I love the way this was played out because for most of the episode, this is something that's played for laughs. This is something that Heather just really wants to know what's going on. But when it's revealed, it actually ends in a very sort of heartwarming, realistic manner. The two of them go up to each other, and at first, while they want to sort of rekindle this relationship, they realize that they both have other things going on in their lives. You know, Father Bra, he's committed to God. He's not going to let anything get in the way of that. And Valencia has a very successful life with Beth. And as much as they'd love to go back to that time when there was, you know, a future for them, they need to move on and accept what is. And I like that sort of bittersweet ending that they can pretend, you know, they can imagine what could have happened, but they need to live in reality and remember what actually did happen. And I thought that was a really great moment overall, and probably one of Valencia's strongest moments, honestly. Valencia is a character I've always really loved, but I feel like these past few seasons, she's really gotten pushed to the background, and I like that they are finally doing a lot with her. And, you know, if they continue to give her these really great stories like they did in this episode, or all the characters really great stories, this could end up being on par with season one, honestly, because I think they really are doing a great job with that. So I really love that story. And then the whole thing with Josh as well, I also really loved, where he at first is very popular and everyone's really welcoming to him, but then he realizes that he actually didn't win prom king. It was actually Hector that won it. And the only reason why Josh got it is because they felt bad, so they gave it to Josh, but Hector ended up winning. And Josh ends up going with the sort of nerdier crowd when he realizes that all of these other clubs, while he was an athlete and doing things like that, there was actually a lot more going on in these clubs, and that was beautiful. That was really well done through the song that George ends up singing, which I love that everyone forgot that George went to high school with them. Again, it just keeps up that gag so well of no one remembering George. I mean, Nathaniel always dismisses him, but now nobody else is acknowledging him as well, which I thought was pretty funny. So that was really great. I liked seeing Josh actually hang out with that crowd, them doing magic. I mean, it's a really great moment. And, you know, the moment where we're realizing Josh is starting to find his passion. You know, we know that he really loves art and things like that, and I'm interested in seeing where Josh is really going to go from here. Where does his passion lie? And I'm excited to see what ends up happening. So yeah, there was really a lot to love about this mid-season finale. I think this is probably one of the most eventful mid-season finales they've done. It was certainly more eventful than the one in season 3 for sure. I would go as far as even say it was more eventful than the one in season 2. I think it's probably the most eventful one they've done. A lot really did happen here. In terms of music, this episode was the complete opposite. The songs were on fire here. Both of them were fantastic. Hello, Nice to Meet You is immediately like top 5 Crazy Ex-Girlfriend songs. I mean, everything about that song, it does such a great job at showcasing the passage of time between Greg and Rebecca and the many sort of faults in their relationship, but also parodying just the awkwardness of it all. And I think that it really hit the right balance for me. The chemistry between those two, just in that song alone, it makes me so excited to see what Skylar Astin's going to do this season. And It's easily my favorite song this entire season. I mean, no question about it. It's fantastic, and I loved everything about it. And then, What You Missed When You Were Popular, that was also a great one. I really love the way that was done. And like I said, the humor in this episode, I mean, this is the kind of humor that I love in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. I love the reference where just very early on, Rebecca's like, oh, it feels like season 2 again, and by season, I mean spring. That was great. The moment where, again, Valencia comes out and she says, I'm here to stay for the rest of the series. That was fantastic. All the stuff with Greg, just like I said, the meta humor was just off the charts in this episode, and I loved everything about it. And then the final moment at the end where Paula, after finally being done conversing with whatever it was that she was conversing with. I forgot what animal it was, but there's this animal that she's now gotten to replace Brendan, and she was so preoccupied by that she completely ignored Rebecca's text. She finally looks up and gets them, and she's just so confused at everything that's going on, and I love that the one thing that she was most upset about was Jim's pans. I thought that was absolutely hilarious and just such a great way to end this episode. This is the kind of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend episode that I love. This episode was firing in all cylinders. There was so much that happened, but it also felt really realistic. The way things ended with Rebecca and Greg, it is very bleak. It does feel a bit hopeless for them, but you know what? Considering the situation, it does make sense. And I'm very excited to see where we do go with them throughout the rest of the season. The same with Valencia and Father Broad. Now that we know of the relation they have, I'm interested in seeing really what they're going to do with that, if they do go anywhere with it. And then Josh, I really do want to see Josh find his purpose this season, what's really happening there. Nathaniel also is starting to become a much nicer person, which is just throwing everyone off. Nobody seems to buy into it. Now, I'm just waiting for him to explode because it is clear that he is forcing all of the niceties, and I think eventually he's going to end up stripping that away. But more importantly, the thing that I'm most excited about is that we still have a lot of time left this season. That is just such a refreshing thing to say. Compared to seasons 2 and 3, when we only knew we had like 6 or 7 episodes left, and then the season was going to be over, we still have like 10 or 11 episodes left, and that's something that I'm very excited to see. I really don't know where we're headed in these next few episodes, and I'm fine with that. I love the way things ended here. I think this season, it's finally starting to get on track. And I'm not saying that it wasn't on track. Like I said, I like the slow paces of this season because, again, they were taking their time. They were waiting for something big to happen. Now it finally seems like the plot is truly starting, and I'm very excited to see where it ends up going throughout the rest of the season overall. But now I am going to grade this last episode, and this episode easily is going to get an A. Everything about this episode I loved. Like I said, they were firing on all cylinders. It was hilarious, but it also had a feel of poignancy to it, and it just really is a great job of paving the way for the rest of the final season overall. And with that, guys, we have made it to the end. I know that this was a very long video, but there was a lot to get through, and I do apologize. I'm going to try to be a lot more consistent with the episode reviews. I'm definitely still going to review it by episode, especially considering how much happened in that penultimate episode. I kind of feel like I'm required to now. But I'm really excited to see where the rest of the season does go. Let me know what you guys thought of these episodes overall. Love to your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
We've met before, but I really can't place it. Oh, was it that time we ate pizza naked?
Right, that night was sick, I ate sauce off your...
Yes, and that burned.
Ow.
It's nice to meet you.